Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I'm your host, Matterall, with Elise Randolph.
Hey, very happy to be here. We got a great show for you today. Some news and one of my favorite little topics you guys probably haven't heard of at all. Even like the more hardcore players haven't heard of. And I think it's one of the most quintessential EVE. So I'm really excited for today.
What is it?
Well, we can't go into it. We got to get into the news first.
That's the hook. All right, let's get into the news then. Well, actually, first we make some introductions, though, so that people recognize voices. I'd first like to introduce back to the show is Kellan Darklight. How are you doing, Kellan?
Good. Hopefully the mic is much better this time around.
Much better. No clipping like last time, which is good. We also have with us for a war update in the north, DJ Eldard.
Hello, everyone. Good morning.
At least, should we introduce our last guest, or?
Yeah, of course. And we also have Deep Spar from Electus Matari.
Hey, everybody. Nice to be on.
All right, good. I didn't want to spoil it. Okay, let's go into news. I'm going to reverse the usual here, and let's talk about Silent Company. The largest high-sec alliance has quickly moved their members out of their alliance because they were war decked, which was interesting because they didn't have any structures. So how is that possible? Anyone know?
Could have a sneaky person maybe anchor a structure in the corp, or transfer a structure and nobody notices, even though there's like this big email that gets or email that gets sent. But it's possible someone just didn't notice.
I suspect it has something to do with Pocos, and I'll explain why during my.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you're both correct. It was something like that, and there is something of a loophole, I think. If we look at the intentions of what CCP, what intentions they had when they did the the war deck mechanic changes, they clearly wanted corporations that wanted to opt out of wars not to be able to be warred. So one of the stipulations was if you have a structure, then somebody can declare war on you. But if you don't have a structure, then nobody can declare war on you. And the idea was that was a way to kind of protect smaller, newer organizations from wars. Because when a war hits, you actually don't know which direction you're going to get hit from, why people are hitting you, which people are hitting you, all that kind of stuff. So it's very disorienting for a new group. But there is a loophole, it turns out. We can talk more about that later when we talk with Deebs. Okay, this is for all you guys. Upcoming Wormhole update Tuesday. It's with Wormholes with Love. That sound right?
I think it's from Wormholes with Love.
Yeah, I think this is mistyped. Right. What do we know about that?
So kind of like the last event that we had, where there was like a change to heavy missiles, and they tweaked a few things, and then threw out an in-game event where you get the Nirvana up the shield implants, which are just the shield slaves. They focused on low sec for that one. This one is an iteration on wormholes, specifically wormhole connections. They're going to drastically increase the number of connections within wormholes, try and spice up that space a little bit because it's been relatively dormant for 11 years. And in that, they're going to have that Guardians Gala event, which is going to be coming back. And those events are going to be all over those sites are going to be all over the place, but they're going to be focused on wormhole space, where they're going to drop much better loot and stuff like that. And you'll be getting the Savior implant sets from there, which are the remote rep implants that people have been begging for years. I remember on CSM 6, Two Step, who was the first wormhole guy on the CSM, I think, he was like, "Hey, you know what'd be great? We want these shield rep implants." And CCP were like, okay, we'll think about that. Or remote rep implants, not shield rep implants. Sorry, I misspoke. And CCP were like, we'll think about that. And we get them. Yay. I think a lot of this, though, and I don't want to.
It only took how many years?
Yeah, I mean, they had a plan for it. It's fine.
No.
And I don't want to overstate Izuki's role in this, but I do believe that the fact that we have a very strong wormhole CSMer on the CSM, or wormhole player on the CSM, that probably contributes a little bit to these changes. At least I would like to hope so, or at least from the outside looking in. So shout out to Izuki and all the people that support.
Oh, excellent. Now, this is also buried inside of Guardians of Gala event, it looks like.
Yeah, that's that's going to be the little, it's a recurring kind of event that happens every year, where you go in there, you shoot some NPCs, you shoot the bad guy at the end, and he's got a chance for a loot drop, similar to the Dragonar Blitz events that we had 2-3 weeks ago. But as we said, these are going to be dropping the Savior implants, the remote rip implants, and they're going to be focused in wormhole space. So if you want to go lose a fancy ship in spooky wormhole space, which is what I'm probably going to do because I cannot resist grinding these things for whatever reason.
There's something special about the Guardians Gala. I don't know what it is. It could be the color. I'm not talking about pink. I'm talking about like purple. Or it could be the Valentine's Day or whatever. This is like the event that reoccurs during February. And I just have fond memories of the Blossom skins. I think they were for charity as well. This happened 2 years ago with Guardians Gala.
Yeah, the Eros Blossom skin is one of my favorite skins as well. They're like limited edition, and in EVE Online like parlance, they're like premium skins. I don't know what that means, but they're one of the coolest. They look like they do not fit in the game at all. It's like little hearts all over your ship, but they're pretty dope.
Yeah. But for some reason, I just have really fond memories of that event. And there's also some really interesting lore associated with this event as well, because it kind of confirms that Serpentis are working with, uh, is it Sisters
The Angel Cartel.
The Angels, yeah. I don't know.
I mean, there's a work with the Sisters of Eve too, but that's not a Guardians of Gala thing.
No, yeah. I don't know. I had a conversation with Ashdrothy, and we were talking about it the other day and reminiscing about that thing. By the way, those Blossom skins are limited editions because they were for breast cancer charity, I believe. So they're extra rare.
I think that's another one. I think that's the Rosada Dawn skin. I collect all these skins, so I have like this eidetic memory of skins. Yeah. It's like me and Graf Telkin are probably the only two people that just try and collect every skin possible, and you wouldn't really expect it from the types of people we are. But
yeah, That's true. Well, good. I'm glad you know about these. Okay, so it's a different skin. Anyway, so check that out. That's from Wormholes with Love. Now, these changes that are coming in for this event, or they're being ushered in by the Guardians Gala, these changes for Wormholes, though, are permanent, right?
I believe so. Yeah, just like the heavy missile iteration, these changes will stick around after the event is over. And I don't know if this is a Team Talos Presents type of thing, but I suspect they probably had their fingers in it because that's kind of their MO, right? Ever since we heard about Team Talos back in October, they've said that hey, we're going to be doing these small iterations every few weeks to keep Eve players on their toes, and this just smells of that.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Okay, so look out for that. Next news item is the Plex for Good for the Australian brush fires, the relief or the fundraiser for money for relief efforts, has finished, and it came in at a whopping 107,454. What do you think of that, Elise?
That's huge. That's absolutely amazing. I'm really there are like a few times where I'm like incredibly hyped to be an Eve player, like really happy because I can't leave, right? So I just have to make the best of it while it's there. But this is especially one of those times. I don't know any other gaming community that has done things like this. And I think in the dev blog you see that over the course of all these Plex for Goods, if you add them all up, we're up to $500,000 raised, which is absolutely insane. But I was doing a little bit of like napkin math when they released the numbers, and I was looking at like Keelan, who we have on as a guest, his donation to charity accounted for like 35% of the whole thing. It's absolutely absurd.
Are you talking about Callan here?
Yeah.
All right, Callan. Tell us about what the results were for your sale.
It was a bit bigger than I was expecting, honestly.
So you were surprised?
Yeah, I think it would cap out at like 2 trillion probably, mainly because of the short time frame.
Yeah. When did you? We talked about this on a couple episodes ago. The gold magnet sale. We had a little audio trouble with you, so it's good to have you back. But you basically, you're one of the champions of the secession trials, which is a big deal. And you took your winnings and you donated it to charity. The actual winnings were a gold magnet chip, which is ultra rare. It was priceless up until now because now we have a price for it. And that thing went for what, 1,000,000 Plex?
1,001,001 Plex.
Yeah. So what percentage of the overall donation was it?
About 37%.
Yeah, that put it in a different category. If you look back, I was confused because I thought, oh, Eve players always raise about $200,000, but that was only one time. They raised about $190,000 for, I think it was the Philippines tsunami. So I always pegged it there. But usually these things raise about $40,000 to $60,000. So your donation was like kind of put a whole nother third on there.
Yeah, it was. I kind of wish my donation was a lower percentage because that means more was donated overall, right?
Right, but we can't help that. You did your part and other people's. It's
I
still
also
it's
I also have
yeah, go ahead.
4,004 or 6 shirts that I'll have to deal with eventually.
All right. Yeah.
I just
Because
hope it doesn't break the redeeming queue when they send them in like individual packages of one.
Wait, explain that. Do you get like a shirt for donating?
Every 500 Plex you get a pair of shirts, and because I donated 1 million Plex, I'm gonna get like 4,000 shirts overall. So it's gonna be a lot of shirts.
Yeah, you could literally wear one a day for years.
we have to get an in-game, hopefully for like next December event, we'll get a shirt cannon for you.
Yeah.
Just it'll be like a ship or like a launcher on your ship. They can just fire shirts at people in space.
Yeah, just like
And
the snowball launcher, but instead of fireworks, the shirts go everywhere.
yeah, and you will have a obscene advantage over people because most people would have like 1 or 2 shirts. You will have 8,000.
Submachine gun.
Well, it's 4,000 total. It's like 2,000 pairs.
Oh,
Wow.
just 2,000.
Well, so now that you've done that, you know, what are your thoughts on it? Glad you did it.
I mean, yeah, I did give up a life of luxury in Eve online to do that, but I managed
Right.
to live this way so far. Should be fine.
Because you could have actually taken that ship that was worth, if you would convert the Plex, what would that be?
Like 3.5 trillion is, I think.
3.5 trillion.
Maybe,
Wow.
maybe a
It
little
was
bit higher.
ballparked around there. It probably would have massively infected Plex prices if somebody started buying that much at once.
Right. That's not even, you can't even gather that kind of ISK. You have to it takes a while to raise that money because anybody who has that much money has it invested in something. They don't have it just sitting there.
Like Scott Manley had invested in Plex apparently.
Yeah. Well, Plex is different, right? Plex you can bank. That's kind of where you store money because it appreciates as Plex goes up over the long term. It ends up adding value or at least keeping up with value. But yeah, so you could have cashed that in for ISK or Plex and just kind of retired forever. Are you like space poor now? That would be so funny if you were broke.
I'm not exactly broke, but I'm certainly more of a asset poor. I only have like a bill and wallet right now, so I'll have to sell some stuff.
We should do a fundraiser for you, Callan, where people donate to you
no,
to
I
make
have
up for that
like
gift.
plenty of assets. I just have to actually sell them.
Still, that kind of wipes you out.
Yeah, my reserve assets have been drastically decreased.
Wild. Well, but now you go down in history books with the donation. I like that. I like that. It's like your gold ring. You had to sell. You just had to sell it. It's pretty cool. All right. Well, Callan, stick around if you want to. If you have to take off, we understand. We're going to get on to this war update. Looking at the North with what should we call the coalition? They're starting to be called 2 different names. You have PandaFam, which is a play on fraternity joining PanFam, and it's easy to say PandaFam. But you also have on the influence map somebody calling them Northern Pandemics.
I mean,
I
I
like PandaFam. Yeah.
And I think DJ gets to choose, right?
PandaFam, for sure. It's a great name. Pandas are the best.
All right. So PandaFam is invading the northern regions that belong to Dead Coalition. Dead Coalition's on its back foot. They got knocked out of Venal into Branch and possibly into as far as Deckline, right? I mean, there's a battle going on right now, isn't there, DJ?
Yeah, we just actually killed the VFK like about 30 seconds ago, it looks like. So it's another good iHub down and get to meme about it, of course, because VFK by Christmas,
Yeah. Can you explain that for people that don't know that reference?
I think it was when Goons originally, like way back, there was, Elise probably knows the story better than I wasn't playing it at the time, so I can't, but it was somebody said they were going to take VFK by Christmas and just turned into a meme every time someone tried to fight Goons. It was VFK by X.
Yeah, I won't go too far into it, but is when I was like a brand new FC and I had my first campaign ever with PL. And part of it was this was after the old Northern Coalition had fallen, and the Russians kind of stopped for some reason invading into Declan. They were just like, okay, we're good, and left us to our own devices. So it was a very young NC dot because they had just been formed and PL, and we were fighting goons. And goons at the time only had like 40 or 50 people getting into fleets. And so we were like slowly grinding. And then a more experienced FC said, "Oh, Elise, you're an idiot. You're doing this wrong. We're gonna go and put every ship we have in VFK and just headshot it and take over." Which is exactly what the Matani needed to get all of his people to log back in. And so our headshot attempt of VFK backfired horribly. We had our entire Supercap fleet camped for a week in that system with like 600 goons constantly there. Uh, and so at the very end, we just got everyone into one pos, reset the password, ejected everyone out, killed the goon Aeon on the way out, and then left. And we never attempted to headshot VFK again.
So okay, so that's where the name comes from.
Yeah. So VFK, not a system that usually changes hands. It's probably one of the more rare systems. If you look on Dotland, the number of times it's flipped Sov, it's probably one of the smaller ones there. Obviously, iHub down doesn't flip the Sov, but it's a pretty big step in that direction.
Right. Okay. So VFK, iHub down. So probably if there's a structure in VFK, that'll go down afterwards. This is, you guys are getting into Decline a lot quicker than I suspected. I thought you would take some time to take on Branch. What can you tell us about what's going on?
A lot of that has been test doing stuff. They've killed, I think this is the second iHub they've killed in there. They've made a lot of timers. This is the second iHub we've successfully taken. We've been more focused on, cleaning up Tino, killing the Keep Star up there, and then just going to start, make the eventual push into Branch.
So there's an interesting dynamic going on there, right? So for those that might be aware, DJ can fill us in. Uh, it's not just Panda Fam that are attacking Darkness. It's also Test and parts of Legacy even that are coming. But because PL, Test, and Winter Coalition aren't really on good terms, Legacy and Test are over there in Declan doing their own thing, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that what they're doing?
It's really odd when Norris and Pro God are on comms together, offering to help each other. Like 2 months, 3 months removed from evicting trying to evict each other from space.
Yeah, so it's a strange dynamic, but I guess it's working, right? Like obviously it's working because you gotta.
Yeah, like at the beginning we had some hiccups, obviously working with new people, but I mean lately it's working out pretty well, I'd say.
And were you there for the big fight earlier this week, where Panda Fam kind of dropped the hammer over the Fortizar?
No, I unfortunately wasn't there, but like I was there for one of the other timers. But yeah, I think we had more Titans and like Goons had people in fleet, which was pretty funny to see in the Typhoon fleet at least. Getting to drop the hammer on Goons is not something that you get to do too often. So it's always fun to do.
Right. So you guys are racking up some wins. You took out a Keepstar in ZH3 TAC. That was a staging Keepstar for Ranger Regiment. That was a few days ago. I think the real shift in momentum, though, was maybe a week before that, where they tried to take out the iHub and were unable to take it because of some lucky sigil that kept the iHub alive, right?
Yeah, that was quite wild. Tino, I was one of the Titans that jumped in to try to kill the sigil, and I was the only one who had hog guns fit. Everybody else has long range guns jumping on the sigil at 0 of him and trying to kill him with he had 30 seconds left in Tosis thing, and we completely failed it. But then a couple days later we RF'd it again and went in for it again and had a lot better of a plan, and it was pretty easy to take the iHub at time.
Yeah, I think the signal was set, even though you couldn't kill that little cargo ship, that the time zone was really able to be dominated by you guys. That was an amazing showing.
Yeah, we're learning a lot about Sov warfare. That's the big thing why we've lost some of the fights. It's just not being prepared to do Sov warfare. Just most of the FCs just the people who want to get a fight and like, oh, in the fight, that means we won the timer. But Solve Warfare is not even close to that. You have to win multiple fights in multiple systems and guard and toe sisters everywhere. So it's a lot harder.
Right, and then the Siberian squad lost a Fortizar. That happened just Sunday, right?
Yeah, that was recently. Yes, that was in where goons are staging. They weren't staging in that Fortizar, but they're staging in that system. So we wanted to make sure we killed the Fortizar so it couldn't be transferred to them.
Was that a strategic? I mean, really a strong strategic target, or was it I think it's a target of opportunity because it
was more like, I mean, the system where goons are staging, PF Dash isn't really like good system to I mean, it's good for what they want to do, which it seems just kill structures in Venon. They haven't really come to Tenal or Brand, so it's good for them, but it was strategic the fort wise because they're living in an NPC station, so you can easily bubble dreads on the undock of an NPC station if something's happening, opposed to a Fortizar where they can PDS and still jump dreads out constantly if something major were to happen.
All right. So if I'm looking here, the total ISK war has it at about Goon Swarm 230 billion to PandaFam's 30 billion. I imagine you guys are winning the ISK war?
Yeah, would say we've had some. I think we've lost maybe one fight since goons came up here, and then we came back like an hour or so later and ended up winning a fight, so that a score for the day was kind of even. But yeah, we've not really flying good doctrines in my opinion, sacrileges and typhoons, but it works. They think it works for them, so I'm fine fighting that.
We do have someone who kind of knows a little bit about the Typhoon. Deeb is a big fan of the Typhoon. I wonder if Asher is like looking at these guys on high sec saying, "Hey, these Typhoons don't seem so bad. They're super versatile." But it does seem like obviously this is just a goon sig deployment, right? It's not the Imperium deployed, so they don't have super caps on standby.
Correct.
They have very limited resources. And they probably just wanted to try some things out, experiment a bit. With the big fight going on, it does kind of seem like it's snowballing out of control. If we can use that, especially in that Siberian squad's Fortizar, where you guys dropped, as you said, more Titans than goons had players. So kind of hard to do anything. I think a lot of people have been frustrated by that, but that's just the dichotomy of like fighting with your super fleet when someone else doesn't have one.
Yeah,
It's a
they
lesson
like
that
Asher purposely said he wanted to deploy under the enemy super umbrella, and we dropped caps on him almost every single fight, and they said they're having fun still. So I mean, hopefully they keep having fun and fighting us.
Yeah, I mean that's. I mean, here's the thing, right? You can whelp a bunch of Typhoons, but if you manage to nab a super or a Titan with them, and you're good to go. You just stunt and laugh, right? That's the whole play.
I mean, all it takes is killing one PL or NC Titan, and their campaign's a complete victory to them.
Yeah, exactly. So don't die, PL. I don't want to get laughed at by Asher.
Definitely.
Everyone else is fair game, though. Could go.
What is going on inside the diplomatiques of that coalition? Because I just saw some moves. FC Jericho moves from Horde to NC Dot with his corporation, and then you have a high director from Horde. I think his name is Arki, taking off to Northern Coalition. So there's a couple of high-level guys moving from Horde to Northern Coalition there.
I think a lot of it just has to do with different play styles of people wanting. Like, I don't want to get too much into it because it's my internal coalition. So, but I think like it just has to do with different play styles of Horde compared to NC and PL. We're all still friends at the end of the day.
We've seen people move in the other direction too, right? We've seen quite a few I don't want to say quite a few, but a handful of PL and NC Corps move over to. So this is one of the first times it goes the other way.
Yeah, that's why it's notable. But you also have, well, Jericho had a history though. He is triumvirate, right? Like one of the guys that holds triumvirate together when Garst, their figurehead, is gone away.
Yeah, he was in Shadow Cartel too, also, I believe. This corp. He's the CEO of Wasted Potential.
Yeah.
Which is the Corp. It's not. It's not calling. It's not calling Try and it's not Shadow Cartel Wasted.
Wild. Yeah. Okay. So we'll keep an eye on the North, as it seems to be. I don't know. It's the momentum definitely seems to be on the PandaFam side, but you never know because really, Goonswarm has just arrived a few weeks ago. So we'll see if they can start to get the footing. Anything else you could tell us, DJ,
I
about
think
what
the
you're?
initiative also is planning on deploying up here again. It's just very like all these groups have deployed up here, but haven't really made much progress. NC has been up here for almost, I think, 5 months now. PL's been up here for about half of that amount of time. So I mean, like, it's going to be interesting. They kind of gave up Tino, which was expected. Branch and Declan are going to be the big fights, I think. Tino never really meant anything to them. It was just extra space to have.
Yeah. Do you see? I've heard rumblings of some of the Chinese players on Dead Coalition starting to defect over to either Fraternity or some other place.
Well, VVV, who is a member of our coalition, not the Widrico, I know they've picked up some players, and the Stars of the Northern Moon, MSN, they've also got some players. So there's just some people who like just don't want to be a part of the losing side or just don't want to move out of their space, so they'll just switch sides.
Right. Also, I just got a report the VFK hub did die, confirmed.
Soon Tests is probably dropping a new iHub there right now, or will be.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Test being kind of a wild card jumping into this arena over it looks like a personal political grudge between the leader of Test, Villy, and the leader of Dead Coalition, Sword Dragon, over CSM stuff that's all NDAs. It's kind of like the reason they're actually fighting cannot be talked about.
I think it started as that, and then Sword Dragon went on. I think it was the Meta Show and was talking a whole lot of trash, and now it's kind of devolved into Villy and Pro God have to prove a point to win now, and they can't just lose. They have to prove a point over it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's probably not a good idea to stoke the fire once you're on fire, but whatever. Sword Dragon, good diplomatics. All right, cool. Anything else on this that you guys want to talk about?
No, I think we're good. It does, as Matterall has pointed out, it does kind of seem like it's snowballing in the PandaFam favor pretty hard. So it'll interesting in the next like 2 or 3 weeks to see how Dead Coalition responds. Sword is a very wily leader. He's been around since the servers turned on, and he's still around, and he's always had a coalition. So I wouldn't count him out.
I don't know. I think his days are over. I'm not making a prediction, but I am making a prediction. And that is like his power source was his Australian time zone influence, which made him a big deal with timers the way they're set up. But I feel like the rise of the Chinese groups, the independent Chinese groups, not as corporations to other groups, or even not as allies to him, right? Because he has Siberian Squad and he has a Ranger Regiment. And before that, he had some other, I forget who else. But if they're abandoning him, and you see at the same time a rise in power with Fraternity as its own identity, or Fraternity allied with VVV or Triple V and MSN, I just think you're seeing an actual shift away from Sword Dragon as a power player. Am I wrong about that?
Maybe. I don't think Siberian Squad and Rage Regiment are gonna abandon him, right? I'm sure a few people will. The people that just want to farm are just gonna say, as DJ say, they don't or says they don't want to move, so they're just gonna stay with whoever owns that territory. But those people don't win you wars, right? They just pump up the numbers a little bit and give you some income. I think Sword will find a home somewhere, and probably on. If I were to predict, he's going to be a member of the Imperium sooner rather than later, and
Mm.
he'll have. They've got a
Fountain
bunch of say.
Aquarius is pretty nice, you know.
Yeah, they've got some say, right?
we,
The Imperium
we
would love to have a strong China time zone.
we did see some, like, what was it, 8 or 9 iHubs were, like, I don't know if they're vulnerable or in self-destruct mode of some sort, but that was kind of curious. Some land changing down there in the south. Wonder what's going on. Maybe they're making a bed for Sort to crash on.
Yeah, I mean that's like I said, I would never count Sword Dragon out. He's a wily dude. He's as I said before, he's had led a coalition since the server's been on. He'll probably be leading a coalition since the server's turned. There's just something about if you look at people who lead alliances nowadays, a lot of them are old heads that have endured the test of time. So I think this is
Yeah.
going to be more of a blip than anything else.
All right. I think he's like, he was Patton, but now he's like riding a broom kind of thing, like like a general riding a broom. He's got his helmet on. He's galloping on this broom. Come on, follow me. And there's nobody behind him.
I mean, it's a moot point. We're all going to get destroyed by when the Chinese realize they don't need any help from Western alliances. They're just going to say, "I'll screw all these guys. Let's just run them all over." So we got 2 years anyways. So
absolutely. I made this point a long time ago on some show. It was I think it was called Nabanaki's Ambition. It was a game about Japan feudalism. It was kind of like a sim war or whatever. And so I was playing it. I think it was Nintendo a long, long time ago. And I played it and played it and played it for hours. And then all of a sudden, all the provinces started flipping to this flag I'd never seen before. And I looked closely and it was Mongols. So what happens is, I think it was China, not Japan. No, it was Japan. What happens in the game is you have a certain amount of time to finish the campaign before the years tick away. And at a certain point, all the Mongolians do is just wipe everybody out. So maybe that's what's going to happen. All right. All right, cool. We'll see which one of us is right in let's say, 8 months from now. DJ, thanks for joining us for this. You can hang around if you'd like. We're going to move on.
Friend.
Yeah, I love having you. We're going to talk to. What are we going to learn here? This is the part that is the surprise topic.
well, it's not super surprise. So I've been kind of like putting feelers around different play styles for quite a long time. And I knew of Deeb's group called Gradient. They're in the Alliance Electus Matari. Deebs and I gave a co-presentation at eVegas. Was it 2 years ago? 2 or 3 years ago?
3 years ago, I think.
3 years ago. So I've kind of always had Deebs on my radar, kind of looking at what he's been doing. And last year there was a huge high sec fight, the biggest high sec fight I think at the time, and they were pivotal in that. It was in Tebeka, and not to rest on their laurels, they actually crushed those numbers in November-ish with another high sec war fight. But the story behind it is really captivating and fascinating for me, at least to me. And it should be captivating to you guys too, because I've been around forever, so I've seen all the stories. So Deebs, I don't want to hype it up too much. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in the world of EVE Online.
Sure. So, just to give a little bit of background about myself and my alliance for everyone who doesn't know who I am, which is probably most people. I'm a member of Electus Matari, and we're a combat-oriented Minmatar loyalist role-playing alliance. We've been around for quite a number of years. Gradient, the corp that I'm in, dates back to 2003, the alliance to 2005. And we're focused on defending the Minmatar Republic. And what that means in practice is that we're focused on anti-pirate activities within Minmatar space, keeping the space lanes clear so that industrials can do their sort of thing. And that's what led us into the current conflict we have, or we just finished with Hogs.
So is it safe to say that the role play like area of the game, the whole community has had like a big resurgence in the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. I won't put an exact date on it, but certainly within the past couple of years, the level of activity and everything in there's definitely gone up, and a lot of that we have to give credit to CCP for engaging more with the community and being more active in that. But definitely the roleplay community, as you mentioned, Thebeka was a big thing. That was a huge deal for us. There were real in-game impacts when the blockading fleets, due to that conflict, showed up in low sec space in the faction warfare zone, um, disrupting a lot of people traveling through there. So that was quite a big deal for us, I think.
Yeah, and like that whole thing was, I believe it's CCP Delegate Zero who's running a lot of the role play sections for CCP. Like they have event actors uh, role playing as these, as like Concord and different factions. They have like Guristas and Blood Raiders. So that's been pretty cool, and it's glad to see that it's kind of breathed a little bit of life into that area. But yeah, you mentioned that your alliance is focused on like anti-pirate stuff and making sure industrials can live their life. How does that play into what you've been experiencing, or like your last war that just?
So the last war that we just concluded was against the Hogs Collective. Um, they showed up in Minmatar space, which is what we care about, uh, late the year before last, and they started basically moving in and kicking everybody else out. Their general MO is that they'll move into an area, they approach all the structure owners with a deal of more or less join us or die. They include some payments of ISK in there occasionally, things like that, but more or less it amounts to join us or die, which is perfectly normal insofar as it goes. But they've got a couple of tricks up their sleeve that really makes them sort of more insidious than your normal join us or die group. And they started moving into Minmatar space. They started poking around at people. We heard talk of it, but between Thebeka, other things that we were doing, we remain active in the war zone. We just didn't get around to dealing with them for a little bit. But eventually they attacked our structures, and that's when this whole conflict really kicked off.
So they're kind of like slumlords, right? They move into an area, say, "Hey, we're bigger than you, small industrialists. Join us, pay us some protection money, and you can keep doing what." So what sort of tricks do they have where they can kind of be a little bit more insidious than it would seem?
So their favorite trick is that they set up a large number of shell corporations and alliances. Um, so normally, when in a high sec war, if you leave the war, you're unable to rejoin the corporation that you just left for a week. But what Hogs does is they set up a whole slew of alt corporations within that war decked alliance. And then you can join the alliance for a fight, leave, and even though you're on a week cooldown, leave, go do mining, run missions, whatever, while not eligible at war, then before that week is up, you simply join a different corp in the same alliance, and then you can fight at the next timer. And they have a sufficient number of this that we saw things like we would fight them, there'd be wrecks on the field. They would drop members out of the War Decked Alliance into neutral corporations, salvage the wrecks on the battlefield, then leave and rejoin the alliance that's at war for the next round, like literally within the same day.
Wow, so they would just after a fight, they'd like leave, and then salvage the wrecks while they were perfectly safe, and then rejoin another corp to get in on the next time. That's wild. It does kind of seem probably not intended with the mechanics, where you can be safe and at war at the.
Yeah, they do that. At one point during our back and forth with them, we had an ally come, and we jointly declared war on one of their corporations to hit a structure of theirs. Then, at the whole timer of that fight, they jumped every member out of the defending corporation, put them in a different alliance, allied that alliance into one of the wars, and then came to defend the structure. This pretty obviously was intended that it would split our forces so that only half of the fleets would be able to engage. Only Electus Matari would be able to engage. But we both fought the fleet on our own just fine, anyways. And what that really meant was that our allies were able to shoot the structure without being impeded in any way. So while they were fighting us, the structure was dying, and they couldn't even do anything about that unless they were able to kill us and then hop corpse back, which I'm sure was their original plan.
That's actually pretty clever of a plan that they had. I mean, it didn't pan out, right? But that's a pretty I mean, that's something I wouldn't have thought of. It would probably have taken me a while to come up with.
It
From the
definitely caught us by
FFC.
surprise. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that. We showed up to fight, and we're talking, and suddenly half of our combined fleet can't actually shoot the enemy fleet, and that took a little bit of what just happened here, but we figured it out, and we managed to come out on top anyways. But one of the things that this allows them to do, and what really propels them in this sort of group adding way, is because they've got these large groups of people that can join a war for a short period, they can manage to inflate their fleets far beyond what your average high-sec industrial corp can manage to even consider fighting, just for the duration of fighting that fight, and then they go back to where they were. So they come across some new industrial corp that tries to put up an Athenora or Raitaru someplace. They say, join us or die. If the defending group doesn't agree to join, they will simply have all of their members join for the timers, shoot the defending structure with a large fleet that the defenders can't possibly face, and then without having to be committed to that fight between the timers, all of those members just go back to their normal war deck immune corporations, preventing any sort of back and forth happen there. Uh, as somebody who is trying to disrupt their activities, I can tell you it's very frustrating to try and fight that.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And they also have some friends in low places as well. Hogs came on my radar when they did their Hogoween event, which is in October. CCB had CCB had like an event in game where there would be 100% loot drops for player, and Hogs decided like, yo, let's just war deck everyone that comes through Hack. So they ended up war decking 180 corps and alliances. And I was in one of them, so I was like, "Hey, who the heck are these guys?" I had heard of some of the players before. There are some pretty big names in there, um, but I'd never heard of the collective before, like the collective group. So we went to fight them. Like me and this one horde guy, we're fighting them. We're having great fights on the undock stuff. The scale was like just about right. And then there was a big fight in Heck, and Pirate showed up with like 80 faction battleships. So not only are you dealing with Hogs, but when push comes to shove, sometimes they've got some allies that want to help out.
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting thing to bring up. The politics behind that fight are some of really quintessentially Eve politics that happened. Um, so Hogs had hit us a couple of times, and we struck back. We got some allies in that fight, and in April of last year, we were mounting a pretty solid campaign and removing a number of their Athenors from space. What Hogs did in response was to hire Winter Coalition to come defend them. So Winter Coalition sent up a number of their alliances to come up and defend Hogs and HighSec, and this escalated the fights from roughly about 30 versus 30 to 30 versus 150, which, while I'm quite proud of how well Electus Matari does in combat, there's only so much you can do at that point. So eventually what came of that is we sued for peace, and there was a 6-month non-aggression pact put in place. Interestingly, though, immediately after that, one of the alliances that came up to fight in the High Sec War immediately tried to recruit. They said that they liked what they saw of our fighting. They thought our fleet doctrines were great, that we were willing to take a fight even though it wasn't certain we would win, or even potentially certain that we would lose, but we thought that we could trade. And they wanted to bring us into their fight down in Nullsec against Legacy Coalition. Well, we weren't particularly interested in that. We've got our focus in the Minmatar Republic. We like our high sec and our low sec stuff. We're not particularly interested in Sov Null as a group. So at first we declined, but they came back. They suggested a 6-month sort of tour with them where we'd help them in their war. And then you'll notice that those lengths of time are exactly the same. They could come up and help us fight Hogs. So mercenaries that Hogs hired were so impressed by us and unimpressed by Hogs that they wanted to come back and fight Hogs afterwards and reverse the gains that Hogs.
That's so hilarious, right? So these guys hired mercenaries. The mercenaries were like disgusted by their client, like, oh, these guys, look how bad they are. We want to fight them now. So wow, that's so. I had like I kind of knew that, but I also didn't know that at the same time. So that is pretty great. I like how this, you're talking about uh, Minmatar High Sec Industrial Corp and like are getting bullied. You get involved, and then the threads kind of go all the way through, and you connect it to the biggest war in nullsec going on at the time, which is Winter Coalition versus Legacy. Like it's just so Eve to me, where you have this one little thing and you pull on it, and it goes all the way over to like this big nullsec fight. So that's fascinating. And you
Yeah.
mentioned that it started off with like 30 versus 30 fights. It's kind of a small scale or medium sized scale for what a lot of people are used to. But it did definitely blow up quite a few times. I know for the Heck Timers, which is happened in November, we covered it on Hockey and Stations. I think it's the largest high sec fight to ever take place. Thousands of people were involved. People that lived in Heck had no idea what was going on. And they were like kind of getting filled in as it was happening. And like as people were shooting the Fortizar, people in Heck were like, oh, that's pretty cool that this is going on.
Yeah, it's also got a scope video on it too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting about that fight is right when Hogs was declaring war on everybody going through Heck at the time, that included the alliance that we had joined, Vindictive. But interestingly, this was also as Vindictive was leaving Winterco and leaving the space that they were in. And because it was near the end of the length of time we had agreed to join them anyways, we were getting prepared to leave Vindictive about a month early at this time. We figured we'll leave Vindictive since they're moving out of their space. We don't want to move to some new space just for a month, so we'll leave at this time. It's all friendly and amicable. We'll go back, we'll spend about a month, prep up, and then we'll start the war on Hogs that we had planned 5 months ago at this time. But then, right as we're about to do that, Vindictive gets declared on by Hogs, and we go, what? Eventually, we realized what they were doing with the Halloween thing, but for about the first 20 minutes there, we were going, Hogs wants to fight Vindictive now? Okay, I guess. And so we launched right in under Vindictive as the non-aggression pact with Electus Matari was still intact. We launched right into a fight with Vindictive against Hogs, and we were actually while that fight in Heck was going on, or in the interim between the timers, we were actually striking at a number of Hogs industrial structures. We were hitting a couple Asbels, I believe a Tatara, a whole bunch of Athenors, and then I think one Astra somewhere in there. So we were fighting their industrial backing at the same time as Black Legion was working on reinforcing that fort. And so once Black Legion announced that they were going to try and take this down, we decided to show up as well. I mean, we were pretty much going to anyways. It was sort of nuts that Black Legion was also doing. So when that came, we had all of our war material ready to go. We were already engaged in this fight, and like I said, we had been planning on stocking up for this. So Hogs declaring on us was really convenient from a timing perspective there. It actually got our war started a month early.
So that's the setup to the war. Like you're just talking about just ongoing hostilities where you guys fight over Astras and you fight over Pocos. You have a peace settlement for 6 months, and then it all comes back around starting in I guess October-ish. So how did this end? Like how did this come to its conclusion?
So we fought them for some time, like I said, within Vindictive, and then around Thanksgiving, right as the 6-month agreement we had before expired, we left Vindictive as they were focused on some nullsec things, and they needed to do their campaigns down in Null where they. And we went back into Electus Matari, and we started a new campaign against them from within Electus Matari. We reached out to some old friends of ours who had helped us 6 months ago, back in April, and they were absolutely eager to come back and fight Hogs again. And we pushed pretty heavily against Hogs from the beginning of December all the way through January. And when you include the time with Vindictive, it was a good solid 3 months of fighting. We managed to push Hogs out of virtually every system they had, from a high of something like 120 upwell structures, plus I really don't want to count how many Pocos. They were down to under 40 structures, and something like 17 of those were reinforced at the time. We had opened up diplomatic talks with them, and we were working on some fairly complex like agreements on you can be here and you can do this but not this, and we'll be here and we can do that and not that, trying to sort of divvy up the space but not allow them to continue what they consider to be their way of life effectively. And those talks weren't really going anywhere. So they got in bed with Pandemic Horde. And I'm not sure of the details of the agreement. I know one of their corps is still in Pandemic Horde and is growing and looks to be pretty big now. But they managed to get Pandemic Horde to start showing up right as we were hitting their main staging Fortizar timers. So Pandemic Horde started defending them, started making sure that we couldn't hit the big timers, but we kept going through those little timers. And it amounted to, at the end of January, Hogs came to us after just having Pandemic Horde run a Pink Pen CTA, form up 200 guys to try and fight our about 40. We declined the engagement, just for the record. But they came, they formed, no fight. Pandemic Horde went back home, and as soon as the structure was repaired, Hogs started unanchoring it and reached out to us with what amounts to an unconditional surrender, where they agreed that they would remove all of their structures from Minmatar space and move out.
Interesting, right? So like kind of like a last ditch effort. They get Horde involved just to save whatever they. And I know internally you had mentioned to me that Hogs had been going through some things, like some of the more PvP oriented people kind of left and joined other groups, and maybe there were some internal fractures there. Do you have any insight onto how it went down?
I've got very minimal insight on that. I do know that one group of theirs, one of the main ones behind pushing the Heck fight earlier, ended up splitting off from them, not amicably. There were some wars dropped and a little bit of skirmishing happening between the two of them. They ended up going to join Pirate. I'm not sure where they're at now. I also happen to know from our peace talks with them that quite a number of their industrial folks had more or less given up and weren't attempting to defend anything anymore. We know that lots of their structures had gone offline. Uh, about half of those 17 structures that were left that we hadn't reinforced yet were all low power. So they were definitely under some pressure there at the end.
Ah, that's interesting. So I guess just the constant fighting kind of just created some cracks. Classic Eve Online fashion. Someone decides or someone breaks, and that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you liberated, you guys being Electus Matari, liberated all those little industrial corps that had to do the join or die thing. Did they ever say thank you? Do they know what's going on? Like what happened?
There's definitely been a couple that have reached out to us. We had a number of folks who were reaching out to us during the fighting saying that hogs were trying to hit them at the same time. But uh, we we've talked with some of them. We've had a couple of them offer to build ships for us and things like that, which we were absolutely appreciative of because for a while there we were going through typhoons pretty heavily, and I think that's a good point to bring up. I want to say while we were winning the war overall without a question, Hogs definitely put up a fight. Towards the end, they were forming something like 35 plus tornadoes and 35 tornadoes plus a fort neuting and ECMing your Logi chain. They were doing some work on us. We went through quite a few typhoons and typhoon fleets and Leshaks dealing with them. They definitely put up a fight at the end.
Yeah, sort of their last go for glory. I mean, I was involved in some of them and watching. I mean, I died horribly, right? So, but that's not. But that's super cool. And before we end with this, which is absolutely fascinating, thanks for coming on and telling us. We did kind of tease in the beginning some of the Poco mechanics that might have been at play for that large high sec. What were you having in mind with the Pocos?
So Hogs used a interesting tactic when we were taking down some of their Pocos. Now, for everybody who hasn't engaged in a Poco war in HiSec, um, when you kill the Poco, the planet becomes completely open, and you have to just drop the new gantry and then throw everything in and turn it on. Except you actually don't. It turns out that in order to claim the planet and make sure that no other Poco can be placed there, all you need to do is drop the gantry and anchor it. You don't actually have to turn that gantry into a Poco. And now you might be thinking, well, why would you do that? You can't use the planet anymore. Well, you do it because of this. Once the gantry is anchored, but before it turns into a Poco, that makes your corp eligible to be war deck because you have a structure in space, which is fine. However, that gantry can be immediately, with no delay, unanchored, scooped by another character, and then re-anchored. So in the 24 hours between you declaring war on whoever anchored that gantry there and the war going live, they just have to get two characters over that, unanchor it, scoop it with a different character, and re-anchor it. And then that war will immediately end because the one corporation no longer is eligible to be shot at. And now you've got a new neutral corporation there that has a gantry anchored. The only way you can beat that is just by being faster at dropping the gantry and anchoring it. Uh, Unless you watch that like a hawk for 24 hours, there's no way you can do anything. And even then, you're once again trying to compete to be faster at scooping the gantry. So effectively, if they win that first contest and they're willing to commit to just cycling through different corporations, anchoring and unanchoring that gantry every 24 hours, you're going to spend 100 million ISK to not shoot anything.
That's
And
actually
literally cannot take the planet away from them once they win that first speed of who anchors the gantry first. Once they win that first contest.
that seems pretty wild. Actually, I'm sure that's
You,
that's not supposed to be how that works.
yeah, you can tell by the looks on faces. I'm totally sour faced, and Elise is all grins.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I will say I've raised the issue with certain individuals who need to know about it because that does not seem like that's working as intended.
Yeah, pretty sure it's not supposed to be that way, but I love the ingenuity.
Yeah,
Yeah, you gotta give them to it. Like they Hogs figured out how to work every aspect of these mechanics because the mechanics are, I don't want to say relatively new, but in Eve terms, they actually are pretty new. The war deck changes and stuff. So being able to deconstruct them in such a way as to basically win uncontested for such a long time, that's some good thinking.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Of course, it means that you deny the planet to yourself. So they tended to use this on sort of outlying places where they had acquired these Pocos by hitting whoever owned them before, but weren't really using them themselves. As again, it does disrupt your own PI. So it's a sort of scorched earth tactic and not really a particularly good long term. This is what I'll do for things that I care about sort of tactic. But as a scorched earth tactic, it is very annoyingly effective, I'll tell you.
So when we're talking about these high sec pocos and stuff like that, how much do you suspect like this was making a month? How much do you think their empire was bringing in between protection, racketeering money, and just controlling all the pocos?
I'd have no idea. Certainly billions and billions a month, probably in the tens plus range. I do also know from talking with some folks who were formerly members of the collective that they do some pretty usurious, in my opinion, buyback rates. I won't quote numbers because I don't have any proof of what they are, but they would make most nullsec alliances blush in terms of what rate of JITA they buy things at and then resell to their alliance mates. So
Wow, so
certainly billions and billions. I happen
this
to know that the
whole
leaders of the group are both worth in 1 trillion plus range. They are fire selling a lot of their assets, so we've gotten a pretty good idea of how much they had. But they were
my
certainly
goodness.
making quite good money.
just trillionaires being a high sex slumlords. That's absolutely mind boggling to me. Like we talked to people who were like really happily grinding sites in nullsec, making like so much risk per hour. And then you just have these dudes playing a completely different game of Eve Online within the same sandbox, and they're trillionaires. Just boggles my mind that how dynamic this game is. So
Yeah.
thanks so much, Deeps, for telling about this. I've been like captivated by this for like basically an entire year. So it's quite cool to see that you guys have a resolution in place and you guys kind of won, and the slumlords for this time have scattered to the four corners of Eve and are doing different things.
Well, I wouldn't say scattered. We've kept an eye on them as you'd expect us to, just to know where they went, and they actually didn't move particularly far at all in terms of real distances. They sort of located to the other side of that Caldari low-sec space next to Pandemic Horde, presumably due to their close relationships with Horde now, and so now they're over in Caldari space. But as long as they don't come to Minmatar space, they can exploit the Caldari for all they're worth.
Sounds like a plan. They'll probably get back on that racketeering racket.
Yeah, racketeering. Well, that's cool, Deeps. Thanks for telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure to be on, and I'll do a quick plug here. Within the next little bit here, I'll post a nice formatted story time narrative thing of this with battle reports and everything that for everybody interested. And I'm sure it'll go into the show notes.
Yeah, we'll definitely
Cool.
throw it up on there on the podcast notes as well. That'll be a treat. That's one of my favorite things to do about Eve Online is just read the posts about it. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't worry, I'm sure we'll see something about Thebecca soon, right?
Only 2 years late.
Only 2 years late.
Well, thanks. All right, that brings us to the end of the show. I want to give out some announcements here. Next week on Talking Stations, that is next Sunday, we will have CCP on for talk about the or what is it? I said it wrong the first time, so it was written wrong, but it is From Wormholes with Love. CCP devs will have them here to talk about how that is going. We're not sure which ones yet, or we'll keep that under wraps. You have any announcements, Elise?
Just a small announcement that we heard from CCP I think earlier this week, which is an interesting development. CCP Fleabix tweeted out that I think that's his CCP name. I'm not quite sure. That he has been tasked with reviving Eve TV as a project within CCP. And the first broadcast will be going out during FanFest. So that's a pretty cool thing. We have a dedicated person to do Eve TV stuff.
Remember that?
If you guys aren't familiar, Eve TV was, I think it was a player-run project in the very, very early days. Before YouTube, you'd have to just download these VODs from all over the place.
DSG and Spiral Junkie.
Yeah, it was EDSP who would later become a CCP community director and then go on to head up the Valkyrie community. Spiral Junkie, who was one of, and Calm Down actually, who were people from Scrap Heap Challenge and now Fail Heap Challenge. You had a player by the name of Roan who was on there back in the day, who would later come on to be CCP Falcon, a community director for 8 years or so. So a lot of history in that Eve TV project. So it's cool that it's getting revived and given some special time or some special resources within the company. So that's really, really cool. I'm excited to see what they put out.
And
with these crazy Icelandic people.
I think relevantly, they produced some of the first Alliance tournament broadcasts as well, did they not?
They did. Those people involved did Alliance tournament stuff. I am unsure if CCP Fleabix is. I know he's only been at CCP for about a year, but I have a feeling every Icelandic person knows a little bit about EVE Online. So I suspect he knows the Alliance tournament and maybe even has some plans for it. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but it's the fact that we have a mechanic to broadcast it within CCP, or a mechanism to broadcast it.
Yeah,
maybe it's not dead yet.
It's another building block. If they're gonna bring it back, this is another building block, right?
Yeah, so that's some pretty big news. I think that's the last kind of big news. I'm excited to hear what they have to say about from Wormholes with Love when that comes out. I believe that comes out on this coming Tuesday, so just a couple days from now it'll be live. So I'll probably buy at least 5 times by the time CCP is on.
Well, we'll take it for a spin, and then we'll be able to talk to CCP Sunday, compare notes with them. I want to say thanks to the subscribers today, especially Brisk Rubal. Nicely timed donation there. Brisk Rubal is one of our best supporters. He's an angel supporter and actually supports on Twitch as well. Good man. He's the new co-host at the Meta Show, so wishing him luck. We also want to thank our producer, January Valentine. Today's stream engineer was actually Artemis Albosa, so very good job. And Elise and myself, yeah.
I was looking at our guests. Keelan coming on earlier today, breaking down his massive charitable contribution of the gold magnet that brought in just over 1 million Plex, more than a third of the overall donations. That blows my mind. And Scott Manley, who is an EVE player, YouTube personality, he's actually the one that purchased it, and he kept whenever like a news article would come out, because obviously like $40,000 spaceship has a pretty good ring to it if you don't know EVE Online. He would always stress like, hey, I'm just the sap that paid for it. You should be talking about the guy who gave it away. And so that's Keelan. So thanks, Keelan, for doing that. Appreciate that. I'm sure all of Eve is proud of you for that one.
Yes,
making this all look good.
Yeah, Scott's a big personality. Does great videos for Eve, and also a lot of stuff for I don't know, astrophysics or astronauts and stuff. So you check out his YouTube channel. He made it possible, but definitely it was Kellon that made the sacrifice. He's the guy that said, "I have something valuable. I'm going to give it for a good cause," and that's why we brought him on a second time to go back and make sure he got proper credit for that sacrifice.
And,
Well, cool.
Again, thanks to Deebs for that that tale of great intrigue, and of course DJ Allard for being around to tell us earlier in the show about what's going on in the north and giving us percentage updates of the VFK IHub that ended up going. So thanks everyone.
Yeah. Lastly, I want to thank Slider for Twitch subscription. Thank you very much there. And the last thing is we wanted to say, because we missed this in the earlier part of the show, this next update that happens on Tuesday is going to have a loot drop mechanics change. You know what that is, Elise?
So I believe it's in wormholes only. There's going to be an increased loot drop for player Rex, if I'm correct in that one.
Yeah. All right, cool. I think that's temporary, but the other changes are permanent. We just forget that piece.
And that'll be pretty interesting to see how that.
It's gonna get hot in there. It's gonna get hot. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We're gonna go ahead and raid Bjorn B. He's always good. And I want to thank Elise and Deebs once again for a great segment on the war with Hog Hitman. That is Electus Matari taking on Hog Hitman. It's a really good story. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on Talking in Stations.